The Ole Miss Rebels open conference play as Kentucky comes to town at Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. We are here previewing, predicting, breaking down this matchup between the Rebels and the Wildcats. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Phillips. He's Dave Shumate. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, turn notifications. Check us out via podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us across all social media platforms, as well as our website, SECUnfiltered.com. This segment brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com. Use promo code SECU at sign up to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 or more lineup. Again, guys, that's prizepicks.com. Promo code SECU to get your $50 bonus today. The Ole Miss Rebels open up SEC play as Kentucky hits the road to Vaught-Hemingway Stadium, looking to play spoiler and potentially pull off a big-time upset in Oxford. We're here previewing, predicting, and breaking down this showdown. Helping me do so, my good friend Dave Shumate. Dave, appreciate you taking the time. We were joking about this before we clicked go live. Finally, at long last, Ole Miss plays someone with a pulse. And again, Kentucky goes on the road looking to play spoiler in Lane Kiffin and the Rebels SEC opener. Going to be a fascinating matchup in Oxford. Excited to break this one down with you.
No, you're right. There can't be anyone more excited than the Ole Miss team and the fan base. Like the season ticket holders had to feel like they've been getting robbed here their first three games because they played one road game at Wake Forest. But no, seriously, I mean, sure, Ole Miss players got to have a little bit more pep in their step when they walked in the building yesterday. I mean, all right, it's conference play. It's conference play. We're playing a good defense. Stoops and them probably coming in with a little confidence, I would assume. Granted, they haven't they didn't throw for a touchdown last week. I think they scored 41 points all on the ground. Overall, though, I mean, 2 years ago, I was actually at the game 2 years ago when Kentucky went there and lost on with like the illegal procedure play. It's like wide open in the end zone. Will Levis hit it. I think it may have been Dane Key. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was an illegal formation call. They brought back. I don't think this Kentucky team's as good as that team, but still, the way they played against Georgia, handled Ohio, probably rolling in with some confidence. I don't think they're really that beat up either, so they should be coming in. Ole Miss, like you said, it's time to rock and roll, especially your next two. You got Kentucky, you got at South Carolina, then at LSU. So you're going to find out a lot about Ole Miss here in the next 3 weeks.
Wasn't that 22 game, Dave? We're going to talk about it more in a second. Wasn't that 22 game? I think I recall the storylines in that one were I think Kentucky was a top 10 team at that point, and that was sort of the, hey, let's kind of get a litmus test. How legit are they? And I just remember people talking crap to Kentucky after that. But that was a really good Kentucky team. Like you said, I mean, that team was,
that's when they were struggling a little bit on the offensive line, but they had, obviously, Will Levis went, first pick in the second round in the 23 draft to Tennessee. Then you still have some of those same receivers that are on the team now, Dane Key and Berrien Brown. Only guy you didn't really have the running back, Rodriguez. Zach Rodriguez was the guy that was kind of their dude. I think he was actually banged up in that game. But no, they had a chance. Again, a tale as old as time. They were good on defense. Shocker under Mark Stoops.
Yeah, and that was an early kick too because I saw
11. You're right.
I saw some Ole Miss folks talking about that. It was a raucous environment the last time Kentucky was in town. They're expecting more of the same this Saturday. Again, guys, like we just mentioned, it is a noon Eastern time kickoff there in Oxford on ABC. Vaught-Hemingway Stadium will be showcased this weekend. Ole Miss, Dave, well, death, taxes, and them being big favorites in 2024. They're 17.5-point favorites in this game. The over-under is set at 52.5. Ole Miss leads the all-time series, Dave, 29-14-1. And like you mentioned, the last time they met was that 2022 game. Ole Miss won by a final score of 22-19. So, again, was a really, really close competitive game back then. But, Dave, let's face it, much has changed on both sides since then. As we dive into this one, like I said, I got to start with just the simple fact that finally, because I've been excited all year, Dave, they've been beating up on inferior competition. Let's call it for what Ole Miss has done. And they've handled their business. Ole Miss is a wagon. I've loved every second. I think I've bet on Ole Miss, Dave, every week of this season, and I believe they've covered every single week because they've just been pulverizing people. Now you get your first test. Listen, Kentucky's not great. We're going to dive more in the details of the matchup. Kentucky's not a great team, but they've got some defensive personnel. Like we saw them against Georgia, give them hell. we know what they've got in the front seven, and Maxwell Harrison at corner, and Deion Walker and Oxendine and Jamon Dumas Johnson. Like, they've got some dudes that are going to challenge Ole Miss a little bit. And I think that's the story, right? I mean, there's plenty to talk about from the Kentucky perspective, but I think the big story of this game, Dave, is, okay, now we're going to start to see just how good this Ole Miss team is. Because, I'm sorry, beating up on Georgia Southern, Middle Tennessee State, Furman, congratulations, even Wake Forest. Good job. You did what you should. But now let's see if you can flex your muscles in SEC play. And I think if they can, obviously it'll make a big statement. But first opportunities this weekend.
No, I agree with you, CP. It will be obviously Ole Miss's overall best challenge from top to bottom as a complete team, even with Kentucky's offensive struggles. But you're right. Definitely it's the offense's biggest challenge. Again, I thought Kentucky was even fine in the South Carolina game, giving up besides like a two or three plays that they busted on. But I think by the time, South Carolina took a double-digit lead, thought they kind of like, offense ain't going to score. They just kind of tapped out. Played well against Georgia. I mean, I think the matchup here on that side of the ball is, I think Ole Miss is going to try to spread them out. I think they are going to have success spreading them out, making Kentucky play a little bit in space. I think the key, though, it'll be one of the keys to the game, I think, especially for Ole Miss's offensive matchup and Kentucky's defensive matchup. Because I think Ole Miss, it is a better matchup for Ole Miss than it is Kentucky. I think Kentucky actually, I think the matchup against Georgia favors Kentucky better than the matchup against Ole Miss. Because I think Ole Miss, because Ole Miss is going to spread you out. Georgia still kind of is, they'll spread you out a little bit. Still want to kind of play in a phone booth a little bit. But I think in this game's going to come down to red zones. I think Kentucky, Ole Miss will put up yards when they get into the red zone. If Kentucky can limit explosive scores, how does Ole Miss do when the field shrinks? When they get inside the 20, is that run game going? Because that's when Kentucky's going to get good. Because we both know they have a really good front seven. So I think that'll be the key. Can Kentucky hold Ole Miss to field goals instead of touchdowns? That'll be a key to if this game's close heading into the fourth.
And I think, too, Dave, we're going to find out about Ole Miss because what are the things we're talking about? Like, we're talking about the hottest teams in the SEC and all of college football. And I feel like the theme this year, Dave, when I hear folks talk about them is they can win in a multitude of ways, right? They can beat you in multiple ways. They can win in a track meet. They can win in a street fight. We haven't seen Ole Miss in a street fight. We've seen them. It's been track meet after track meet, right? And good for the Rebels. I mean, I'm not saying, by the way, they can't do that. I'm just saying we haven't seen it. So to your point, Dave, I will be fascinated when the field shrinks and Ole Miss needs to pound the rock. What does it look like? Because we just haven't seen it yet. And to your point, like, Kentucky's not great again, but like that defensive personnel is still there, and they've been good. Like, they've been really good.
It's traveled outside of like two or three busted plays against South Carolina, which was an overall bad game for the whole team.
Yeah. I mean, it's for Kentucky, it's been the offensive side that is doing them. Let's go to that side of the ball. Is there a recipe for success, Dave, for Kentucky? I mean, we've seen Brock Vandagriff be, his legs can be a difference maker, I suppose. And the offensive woes, you mentioned Barryon Brown, Dane Key. They got Dingle at tight end. I don't think Chip Trainum is going to be back for this game at running back.
I still think it's just Demi.
He's still Demi Sumo Karngbe. So
Karngbe,
I just, but man, I think Ole Miss, we're probably going to see that defensive personnel for them really shine in this ball game. Like, I just, they've been dominating, obviously, but we're going to see it now, man, and Brock Vandagriff struggle mightily against South Carolina. Georgia, obviously, they didn't find the end zone for 2 weeks, right? And then finally, you and I were joking over the weekend that Kentucky they're going to throw a party in the street for scoring 41 points. I
don't think Kentucky's thrown a passing touchdown in 3 weeks.
Since the opener, right? I don't think since the opener they've thrown a passing touchdown. So in your mind, when you look at that matchup, the Kentucky offense against the Ole Miss defense, what jumps out to you? I mean, do you think there's any hope the Cats can move the football with any sort of consistency?
I think if you're, first of all, for the Kentucky side on offense here, I think if you're Bush Hamden, if you're Mark Stoops, you got to go into that game thinking, how can we be good on first and second down to get into manageable third downs? If they're living in third and long, that's just for any football game. They're going to be in trouble, especially with that offense. Now, I say that, like teams like Alabama, teams like Tennessee, the really explosive teams on offense, they could go convert a 3rd and 10 or 12 to 15. Certainly, in today's college football with space, for sure. This Kentucky team cannot do it. So I think they got to go into this game this week. Hey, what can we do to pick up 4 to 5 yards on first and second down. What can we do so we can be in a manageable third down? If I'm Ole Miss, I'm bringing pressure, aggressive pressure. Hey, they may get us on a screen real fast for a play or two. But I think if we consistently blitz the A-gap, getting into Brock Vandagriff's face consistently, we're going to force turnovers. We're going to get them in negative situations on first down. I think that would be the game plan if I'm Pete Golden and Ole Miss on defense. Again, if I'm Bush Hamden on the other side, I'm trying to figure out, hey, maybe some screens because I know they're going to be aggressive on first down. We just need to try to get 4 or 5. We need to be in 3rd and 2 to 3. That's where we need to be in these games for us to have a chance going into the fourth quarter. Just like the Kentucky defense, I think needs to be solid and stand up in the red zone.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dave. I think that's where Kentucky has to live, is that 3rd and short, 3rd and manageable. To your point, I mean, it applies for a lot of teams, but when you lack the explosiveness that Kentucky does, 3rd and long is, and especially with the pass rushers that Ole Miss
I think
has.
you would agree here, CP, don't you? I think the recipe for a win here for Kentucky is be good in the red zone on defense, limit them to field goals, and hey, you're probably going to have to go own the time of possession. We're going to have to keep them off the field too, and you know what that means, CP. You're going to be having to convert third a lot. If Kentucky's in this game in the fourth quarter, I guarantee you go look at the box score and they're, what would you say? I would probably say 5 for 8 on third down, 6 for 8. And you're like, man, Kentucky's whipping them on third down. They're just
8, 10, 12 play drives.
100%, which is hard to do to ask for
winning
football teams now to be that consistent for that far, and especially this Kentucky team. So
they're winning TOP like 36-23 or something, 36-24, something like that. Like that's I think that's the only way. Again, you look up in the fourth quarter and they are in this ball
game. It's
a
single possession game.
Yeah. Right, exactly. So the biggest thing in this game, Dave, I already mentioned it, but just like it's almost like Ole Miss they've been wildly impressive. I mean, the way they've been beating people is just, I mean, I don't care who you're playing. It's been fun to watch. But let's face it, right? And I don't know how Ole Miss fans will take this. I'm sure they'll understand for the most part. Like, we haven't made them appointment viewing TV yet this season because why would you? I mean, there's other games on and they're 40, 45, 50-point favorites. I'm so excited, Dave, to finally sit down and really let's take a hardcore look at Ole Miss and let's really start to critique them. I don't want to say you figure out what you have because you're 4 games in, but we're going to start to figure out what they have. And let's just call it for what it is. Like we are. I mean, it's, pick on somebody your own size kind of vibe. And, the competition will get better, but this is the first test. You finally get into, somebody a little bit on your level and your own size, if you will. And, and I'm sure for Ole Miss too, Dave, that's going to be a huge motivating factor because I'm sure they're, keeping that. I mean, I've been wildly impressed, Dave, the way I was curious. Hey, is it going to be kind of hard to be motivated to go out there and do your thing and play your best? They have not. They have had the chip on the shoulder. They've gone out there and not just wanted to win, but beat people to a pulp. I mean, I got to think they're going to want to do that same thing here. And really, I mean, make that, that first SEC win, they put an exclamation point on. I got to, Jackson Dart, I know he's not thinking about the Heisman Trophy, but everybody else is. And the numbers he's putting up every single week, he's setting records. Threw for 382 last week, 4 touchdowns. I mean, they've got so many different weapons. Trey Harris went for 225 receiving and 2 touchdowns. So I got to think, Dave, again, that this is a game that it's not a name your score game or anything like that, but this is a game that I think Ole Miss going in knows they can control this football game. And I think they're going to want to put an exclamation point on this win.
Yeah, first you said they hadn't been appointment television yet, but you'd be wrong. CW, they were playing Wake Forest. There's a lot of appointment television.
Very good point. CW, I apologize.
Back in the 90s, early 2000s.
My bad.
Ole Miss left that channel up. But to your point, you're right. I feel like this is the first real test. We're going to find out. Ole Miss will be, like you said, more national eyes will be on this game now. You're right. I think still Ole Miss defensively, we may see how aggressive and how opportunistic they are this week. I still think, even if they play a good game this week, I think we can all agree, okay, well, we still don't know. I still think they'll be tested probably even more the next week in Columbia. But I do think the offense will find out. Obviously, Ole Miss is a really good offense. We will find out if it's in the elite echelon. And I think I lean towards it probably is. If they go put up over 40 points on this Kentucky defense, that would be pretty impressive. I don't care if it's at home. That would be pretty impressive. Georgia didn't do that. South Carolina didn't really do that. This would be really impressive if they could go out and control this game from start to finish. And even if it's not start to finish, if it's in the second half, even the fourth quarter, you're sitting there and you're like, man, Ole Miss is at 41, 42 points. And put up over 400 yards, 500 yards, like you mentioned. Jackson Dart putting up some Heisman numbers potentially for New York in December. I think we're going to find out about Ole Miss, how versatile, and also we're going to figure out how good is this Ole Miss offensive line. I think it's good. It's got a lot of new pieces, but like you mentioned, you already named some of them. Deion Walker, the front seven, we got Jamon Dumas-Johnson, De'Aaron Jackson, Octavius Oxenine. These are some legit dudes that are going to be playing on Sundays on Kentucky's front seven. We're going to see how good. It's good to solid, but how good this Ole Miss offensive line is.
Yeah, going to be a test for both sides for sure. I think Kentucky's going to have to play, not to dive into my prediction early, but they're going to have to play a nearly perfect game defensively, like you mentioned, to come up with some big plays, some turnovers. And I say make Ole Miss do things that they characteristically haven't done this season, but this is competition that they have not faced this season, to be transparent on it. From an individual personnel standpoint, Dave, I'm excited to see the continued evolution or what have you of the Ole Miss running game. Henry Parrish Jr. has just kind of emerged into that RB1 role. And I'm kind of curious, Dave, I guess, has Ulysses Bentley been banged up a little bit? Did I miss that?
Yeah, he's been banged up. He missed the first week, too. Yeah, he's been banged up. I think he's supposed to be coming back this week.
Yeah, last week against Georgia Southern, he had 2 carries for 9 yards. So I'm curious, does his involvement, does it increase this week?
I asked someone that question last week that lived in Oxford, close to pro. They said 2 weeks. So I'm assuming this was probably the 2-week mark where he'd be back full time. But you're right, he had a couple carries against Georgia Southern.
Yeah, just 2 again. Henry Parrish has really slid in, been that guy. And then when it comes to the weapons on the offensive side, Dave, yet again, it's just every week, man. Like Trey Harris goes off, Juice wet. It's crazy when you think about what they have on the outside. And I'm curious, Dave, who does Maxwell Harrison cover, right? Like what, do they put him on one guy? Does he kind of float around the field? Because you got Trey Harris, who people will argue is the best receiver in the SEC. And last year, people were arguing Juice Wells was the best receiver in the SEC. You got them both, right? Along with Jordan Watkins, along with Caden Lee, along with Prieskorn at tight end. It's just an embarrassment of riches. I don't know how.
You know what I just saw? I got mixed up injury report wise. It's Ulysses Bentley's been dealing with personal stuff. Is all it says. Jordan Watkins is the one who missed the first game with I think a soft tissue injury. He's supposed to be coming back. But to my point on that, Caden Lee's the kid that's been stepping up for them on the outside. Is kind of that slot guy.
Indeed. So, Dave, as we dive into our predictions, let's lock in some picks here. I'll let you start. Ole Miss, Kentucky, Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. Rebels looking to move to 1-0 in conference play as they finally get underway in SEC play. Kentucky looking for a big upset. How do you see this one playing out between the Rebels and the Cats?
You're right. I think Oxford will be buzzing this week. The Grove will be buzzing. We'll have a kind of different feel out there, a little more juice. It's a conference game. Probably the most anticipated game, not probably, most anticipated game they've had all year. As much expectation as Ole Miss has had going into a season since I can remember, maybe since Eli Manning's senior year when he decided to come back. SEC game gets a solid, traditionally last 10 years, solid opponent. Take away what you think about Kentucky this year. They are good on defense, struggle on offense. Like I mentioned, I think this game's going to come down to how Kentucky stays ahead of the change, has to get into third and manageable. Me and you talked about it. I think they're going to – if we look up and this game's a one-possession game in the fourth, it's probably because Kentucky's been really good on third down. They're owning time of possession. And I think the defense on Kentucky will be really good in the red zone and that they got to hold Ole Miss to field goals. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen. That's all the stars aligning. I think Kentucky's defense could hold Ole Miss a couple of times in the red zone and hold them to field goals. I don't have a lot of faith in Brock Vandegrift for the Kentucky offensive line. It's not something, it's the other. I feel like we don't even know if their receivers have improved. They led the league in drops last year. They have some athletic guys. We saw that in 2022, last time they were in Oxford. But have they improved? We can't tell yet because the offensive line can't ever hold up front, or Brock Vandegrift's just not getting it right, just not getting the job done. I think they live in some third and longs. I think I see Ole Miss being opportunistic, forcing some turnovers. I think Ole Miss is going to do things on offense they're used to doing. They're going to spread Kentucky out again. I think Kentucky defensively matched up better with Mike Bobo and Georgia's offense better than they do Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss Jr.'s offense because they're going to spread them out. I think Ole Miss puts some yards up. I do think Kentucky holds them to some field goals. I just think critical turnovers for Kentucky, critical negative plays from the Ole Miss defense, I think it's too much to overcome. Kentucky gets a couple of drives going, looks a little bit better on offense than they did against South Carolina and Georgia. And to be fair to Kentucky's offensive line, they're not going to be intimidated because they've seen a good South Carolina front. They've seen a good Georgia front. Even though Georgia has injuries, it's still a good Georgia front compared to most other teams in the country. they won't be taken back by Ole Miss, but I think Ole Miss will overwhelm them. If Ole Miss gets to a quick start, though, 14, 17, nothing right out of the gate, this could be a landslide. This could get really ugly. Ole Miss gets off to a solid start, but I think Kentucky makes some stops in the red zone to keep this game a little closer, especially at half. I think I'm going to go finals about 38-14. Again, I think Kentucky puts up a good drive or two, better than they've looked in some other conference games so far in their other 2 conference games against Georgia and South Carolina. But I think Ole Miss still, it's tough to keep them completely down. Just like Tennessee's offense, I just think they spread Kentucky out, and they have a lot of success on Saturday. Give me Ole Miss 38-14 in the SEC home opener at the Vault.
Think about the pressure, Dave, on Kentucky going into this one. That, I mean, there's a very realistic path to you being 0-3 in conference play and having scored 0 touchdowns in those 3 games. I mean, that's damning, my man. I don't give a damn who you're playing. That is,
my score prediction doesn't reflect it, but you're right. That's real.
That could. I'm just saying that could happen. Like
crazy
defensively. Yeah, Ole Miss defensively is that's one of the best groups in the conference. Like it very well could happen. You mentioned the offensive line issues Kentucky has, and Brock Vandagriff has been less than stellar. And to your point, they can't even really utilize the weapons on the outside. So, Dave, I'll say this about this game. I'm not going to waste anybody's time with path to monumental upset. Ole Miss is a wagon. Do not overthink this. Until the Rebels give us a reason to not hammer the number, you cannot set it high enough. Ole Miss is going to win this football game, Dave. They're going to cover 17.5. It's going to be a comfortable victory. I don't disagree with you. I think, it's the first 4 games. The most complimentary thing you can probably say about who Ole Miss's faces, they've been warm bodies. I don't know that you can say much more than that. All due respect to everybody they've played. They've faced off against warm bodies. I don't know that I can say any more than that. They're actually going to be facing off this weekend against some guys, to your point, that are going to be in the league, that have some talent, right? Like there's going to be some legit ball players on the other side of the field. And I do think, to your point early on, maybe it's a situation kind of like the Oklahoma-Tennessee game where the defense is getting some stops and they're flying around. It's like, yeah, man, we're keeping our team in it. And you look up and it's like, oh my God, it's 21-3. It's 20-3. Like we're just not as in this as we once thought we were. That's going to be demoralizing. The offense is not, there's going to be no balance with this football team with Kentucky. That's going to wear on them at some point. I think Ole Miss, and I think the margin of victory could be even greater. I feel like I'm doing Kentucky kind of a favor with the score prediction, but I do think Ole Miss wins. Ole Miss covers. They've just got too much firepower, and there is no way Kentucky can go shot for shot, blow for blow. Walter Nolan is a guy I look for to have a big game on the interior and just completely wreck everything Kentucky is trying to do from an offensive standpoint, getting up in the – Dave, quarterbacks hate that interior pressure. I think he's going to be feeling that. I don't see any way in which Kentucky, like you said, can go blow for blow. I like Ole Miss. I like Ole Miss to cover. Give me Rebels 31, Kentucky 10. So, again, I'm giving Kentucky a touchdown, offensive touchdown, which would be the first of the year. But I have gave him 2. I have no faith that the Cats offensively are going to be able to do much of anything that's going to keep them in the ballgame realistically. And so I think for Ole Miss, again, are they going to put up 50 or 60? I mean, if they do, my goodness, with the conversation we're having next week. But they're going to do enough offensively. A lot of run game, I think, with Henry Parrish. They're going to take their shots. They're going to get their explosives. And I think they're just going to wear Kentucky down, pull away in the second half, and put this thing to bed and start out in conference play 1-0.
No, I agree with you. I think if this game is close in the fourth quarter, I would be pretty surprised.
Yeah.
It's a one-score game is what I mean when I'm defining close. I would be a little surprised. Ole Miss is just going to be too much for them.
I think it's more likely, like with my score prediction or even yours, that it's 38-7 or it's 31-3 and Kentucky gets kind of a late cheapie. Like I think that's probably more likely, to be honest with you. Either way, though, again, like I mentioned, folks, if I've ever done anything for you, it's try to win you some money. Don't overthink this. Take Ole Miss minus 17.5. Until they give us reason not to, take the 17.5. Trust me. Guys, on that note, do you agree with us? Do you disagree? How do you see this playing out when Ole Miss and Kentucky do battle at Vaught Hemingway Stadium on Saturday afternoon? Guys, that's going to do all for us. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in again. Make sure you like, subscribe, turn notifications. Check us out via podcast, wherever you get those as well. We're also across all social media platforms as well as our website, secunfiltered.com. For Dave Shumate, I'm Chris Phillips. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in, and we will catch you on the other side.